All righty. Let's get started. My name is Joel Guerin. I'll be your host for this evening. I want to thank you all and welcome you for allowing us to spend some time with you this evening to discuss our program with you. By way of background, I am not a practitioner. I have spent most of my life running medical device manufacturing companies. My last job before I actually formally retired a number of years ago, I was the president of the medical division at Tempur-Pedic. And so my background has been primarily in manufacturing and marketing to the healthcare world, as opposed to being a practitioner that actually delivers healthcare to the public. I actually came out of retirement when I was introduced to this program because I thought it had unbelievable potential to literally start the process of changing the paradigm in our entire healthcare system away from being a purely sick care driven system to one that can focus in a scientifically validated fashion on wellness and literally not only change lives for the better, but also help reform our healthcare system in its cost structure. Because I think one of the biggest flaws in our system is that we've lost personal responsibility among our population for maintaining our health in the first place. And so we're developing a system that is simply becoming more and more expensive in treating or managing sickness and disease, as opposed to preventing it through wellness and health initiatives. And I think this is the beginning of that type of a thrust into our healthcare system. This meeting has been limited. The reason you had to register for this meeting is it's limited to people who have an appropriate involvement in the healthcare industry to understand the difference between what constitutes a legitimate off-label claim and what does not. This company and this science has a great deal of validated science behind it that we'll go into in detail, but it does not have any validated off-label claims, even though it has a great deal of extremely positive anecdotal information about its impact on the human body. We do not allow regular consumers on this call simply because this is not the kind of speech they should be using in marketing this product to other consumers, which is what the core program was originally designed to do. However, in the hands of healthcare providers, a healthcare provider is empowered and not limited by the Duché language that regulates speech in the consumer world for supplements. Practitioners are allowed to diagnose and treat things. Obviously, that's the purpose of healthcare practitioners, and so you are allowed to use nutrition and lifestyle changes as part of that process, and you're allowed to discuss it in the confidentiality of a client-patient, doctor-patient privileged relationship that's generally governed by HIPAA or the equivalent regulatory laws in Canada. And so we're restricting this call because we are going to get into that type of speech in this call. We're going to hear from a doctor who has shared this privileged experience with me for over 10 years with the development of this science and the experimentation with various marketing means with this science over the course of the last 10 years, and has achieved some pretty remarkable results with it. We are embarking on clinical trials starting later this year, so we will be developing those off-label claims. But in the meantime, for this type of language, we have to limit the exposure to people who are licensed and trained to understand what can and can't be said publicly, as well as in the confidences of a relationship. So that being said, my last comment on the subject is simply that if somebody's fooled me and filled out the registration incorrectly and logged into this webinar simply to hear that side of this story, then I can't stop it, but I can caution everybody that if you do use the diagnosis or treatment or prevention type language outside of the limited doctor-patient relationship, you are going to be violating Duché, and you could be subject to removal from the program. So that's just a word of caution. What I'm going to do first of all, though, is I'm going to take a few minutes and I want to go over the program that we have historically had We had a slightly simpler version 10 years ago when the program was first launched, with the first, and as a matter of fact, the predecessor company in 2008 launched the very first consumer genetic test in history. And the interesting thing to note is within a year of the launch, over 20 companies were already joining that same space, offering some sort of genetic test to the public. And the FDA got extraordinarily involved at that time because their big concern was that those of us that were providing genetic information to the public might create a situation where a consumer would go and do something fairly serious in response to genetic information that could turn out to be false. So their biggest first concern was the accuracy of our test. And I want to open this conversation with you all by simply telling you that in the 10 years I've been involved and in the approximately 50,000 people that have been swabbed, there has been no reported documented instances of there ever being an error in a test conducted by this company or the preceding company. And that is unique. All of the other 20 companies that joined us immediately after 2008 have been found by the FDA to have inconsistencies in their tests. The way they went about it was to simply take the same human being at the FDA and simply create different personas and send in the same sample over and over again to see if they got different results. And in literally every case except ours, they did get different results. What I'm going to do is go over the presentation of the consumer version of this first, because it's good background for you, and it will show you what the real intent of the product was. This is the program as it is now structured and being offered to consumers. And we're going to start this process with a little video that I love to use because it's clever, it's attractive, and it really does give a very good 2.5-minute overview of what this program is all about and how the customers perceive it.
Your DNA makes you unique. You have one genetic code, only one body. You don't need everybody's nutritional supplements. You can have your own. Cut your losses and move on. The days of blind nutrition are over. Your DNA knows exactly what you need, and ÜFORIA delivers it. Welcome to your very own designer nutrition. We're all potentially susceptible to certain physical ailments based on variations in our genes passed down from our parents. These genetic variations are called SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms. We aren't able to eliminate SNPs from our DNA, but we can do something about them. We can take action to optimize our physical health. It begins with a simple DNA test. Swab the inside of your cheek and mail your sample to ÜFORIA's state-of-the-art laboratory partner for analysis. Strict HIPAA guidelines are always followed, so your information remains confidential and secure. Based on your DNA results, a one-of-a-kind nutritional formula is created just for you. This is your very own ÜTrition, designed from peer-reviewed plant-based ingredients plus vitamins and minerals. With so many high-quality ingredients and so many of us, every formula is truly unique. Each custom formula is one out of nearly 400 million possible combinations. And while your ÜTrition is being customized, you can immediately begin to make your health a habit. Every ÜFORIA starter kit not only comes with a DNA test, it also includes a pre-trition formula. This is a mild and gentle cleanse. It also supports the body's preparation for the optimal ÜFORIA experience. The pre-trition formula contains a robust combination of quality active ingredients, including AC11, frankincense, and astaxanthin. Pre-trition gives your body a fresh start. You'll be prepared when your customized ÜTrition arrives, which takes approximately 2 to 4 weeks, delivered right to your door. You'll receive a 30-day supply of your customized formula, along with a detailed action plan that explains what you need to know about your SNPs. Staying on track to meet your nutritional needs for the rest of your life has never been easier. You can receive your customized designer ÜTrition delivered to your door every month, all for less than the cost of buying the nutritional ingredients separately. Finally, everyone's unique biology meets one-of-a-kind technology. Your DNA is talking, and ÜFORIA gives your body a voice.
that's the overview of the program. The vision of the company is to recognize and acknowledge that all human beings are different, and we're finding out a lot of the reasons why in the physical, structural reasons why we're all different. And it's trying to match that up with the science that's involved with the genetics and nutrition, to basically combine those two in a way that will benefit individuals better than ever before. Interestingly enough, the original intent was simply to support the body in a more targeted fashion based on genetics and based on the variants that were found in the genes. And the intent was to simply have people hopefully be healthier and stay healthier, which could also potentially mean that they would live longer. Interestingly enough, though, the very scientists behind the program who had developed the program were absolutely blown away by the results that they experienced. And we'll get into this a little bit later in terms of actual predictable clinical impact on their bodies as a result of the combination of ingredients that were matched up with the genes and the variants in the program. Very quickly, just look a little bit at the history of nutrition. In the very beginning, we had what we call blind nutrition. I'm old enough, and many of you may be old enough to remember the food pyramid. As interesting as it was trying to conceptualize the fact that there's some foods or food groups we should have very little of, and building down the pyramid to the groups that we should be able to eat large quantities of safely, it was still basically a one-size-fits-all approach. It was certainly wasteful because it did not account for the fact that people's bodies really were different and that their nutritional needs were really different, which is something that even the medical profession hadn't realized until of late. As a matter of fact, as Dr. Dixon will tell you in a little bit here, even the AMA's formal position as little as 20 years ago was that there was no connection between nutrition and disease. And of course, we're all finding out that that's extraordinarily wrong, and that there is a very extraordinary connection between it. But nothing that we did during these decades acknowledged the fact that food was anything other than fuel for all human beings. We finally started making progress in this area. Vitamins were a great example, the one-a-day kind of a concept. We decided everybody could have vitamins, and then we added minerals to it, but it was still a one-size-fits-all approach. It really did not address in any way, shape, or form the fact that there were differences between human beings, and that some of the ingredients may be too much or not enough or too little for various people. We finally have come to the point where we are today, and this is, we have to put this in perspective. This is really just the beginning of this science. No one on this side of the fence is claiming that this is the end-all and be-all of nutrition for all human beings, but this is the first attempt to literally customize a supplement for a single human being based on their actual genetic profile and what their genes scientifically say that they need. And so health can finally become a habit as opposed to something that we simply experiment with, which is what we've done in the past. It's actually a very simple program, and I think one of the beauties of the program is that it takes this extraordinary science that's been in development for 25 years now, and it boils down to something that any consumer could do if they choose to, simply by buying the kit, which is number one on the screen, registering it and paying for the DNA test, doing the swabs and mailing them off in number two on the screen. And in number three, they simply receive their genetic report and their customized product. And so they don't even have to understand the genetics or the nutrition in order to be able to benefit from it. And that was the goal of the program, was to make something that would be scientifically validated but available to the masses. What's in that starter kit is 180 veggie capsules that are a very powerful nutritional combination in their own right, which include a substantial amount of prebiotic fiber and digestive enzymes in addition to a whole host of vitamins, minerals, and plant-based ingredients. There's 2 swab brushes, one for each cheek. There's a black envelope that the swabs go in, then a prepaid, pre-addressed return envelope, and there's a $100 discount for the lab test, which brings the cost down to $99. When the kit is registered, there's a barcode associated with those swabs, which is the only identifier for that DNA when it's at the lab. One of the big issues today in the consumer world is the confidentiality of their genetic information. And our information is literally goof-proof simply because there are no human identifiers ever allowed in the lab. That unique barcode is the only thing that identifies it when the analysis is done. And by the way, we're testing 663,000 SNPs. We're not just looking at the 18 in this panel. The customer is paying for these 18, and that's what we're discussing and disclosing, and that's what we use to build this formula. But we do have all of these others in reserve for the future. The samples are destroyed after 60 days, and the data is preserved in a completely HIPAA-compliant environment. The tests are run by a CLIA-certified and CAP-accredited laboratory. And also, as an aside, this company that's launched this last version as ÜFORIA is also investing in its own DNA lab, which will be opening in-house within the late 2019. So we will literally have 100% control, not only over the processes, but over the security of the information. This slide shows you the 16 genes and 18 variants that we look for at this point in this program. And the reason it's 16 and 18 is that there's 2 different SNPs on the FTO gene and 2 different SNPs on the MTHFR gene that we're looking for at this point. And the RS numbers are the actual scientific notation for the actual specific variant that we look for. The reason we have to be that specific is because we can only use genes in this program that have been validated to have importance in the biochemical processes that support health and wellness long term, but we also have to look at only specifically validated SNPs that have been documented to have a predictable impact on that person in terms of raising their predisposition towards healthcare problems in those designated areas. So we have to use specific SNPs, not just any SNP on that gene. This is a sample of a video that we're doing to explain the genes.
CYP11B2 gene helps to maintain blood pressure in normal ranges and is essential for a healthy heart. This gene encodes the enzyme aldosterone synthase, which is an enzyme necessary in the biosynthesis of aldosterone. Aldosterone is a hormone that plays a role in achieving favorable salt and fluid levels in the body, and hence retaining a healthy blood pressure already in the normal range. Individuals with a SNP and the CYP11B2 gene can benefit from supplementation with ÜFORIA to help maintain blood pressure levels in the normal range and support overall cardiovascular health.
Okay, let me back up here a second. What's important here isn't just what Dr. Myers was saying. It's what she's not saying. The consumer-facing program does not claim to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure anything, although the CYP11B2 gene has been validated extensively to have a significant impact over blood pressure, and the variant that we're looking for has a documented predisposition to raise blood pressure. Obviously, it's difficult to look at that science and then give somebody a nutritional product that is geared towards offsetting that variant or supporting health in that area with the intention of reducing that predisposition without somehow at least implying that you're somehow preventing the increase in blood pressure. Now, the reality is, and the reason for the exclusivity of this call is that that is exactly what we're experiencing in the real world, and that's what physicians in this program are experiencing with their patient populations. But the challenge we have is separating that for the consumer world because we're legally not supposed to claim to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure anything. But we are absolutely targeting genes and variants that do have substantial documentation for raising these predispositions. This is a slide that shows some of the ingredients in the program. The vitamins and minerals are synthesized because of the need for purity. They're manufactured to USP standards, national formulary standards. The product would have substantially greater volume if we were to try to derive the vitamin and mineral components from natural products because they wouldn't be as concentrated, and it would substantially increase the volume of the product to a point where it would not be terribly marketable. However, the scientists behind this program have put a great deal of time and effort into determining to their satisfaction that they are as bioavailable as those found in nature, but it's only the vitamins and minerals that are synthesized. All of the other ingredients, as you can see here on this screen, are either extracts or components of natural plant foods. To the extent possible, they're all bought organic. They can't all be organic because there's components in our program that simply don't have an organic labeling. They are all non-GMO. They're gluten-free, and they're free of all of the 8 standard allergy groups. They're also of the highest quality ingredients. They also go through a very extensive quality control program. They're tested for any contamination from heavy metals, pesticides, mold spores, moisture content, all sorts of things, to be as pure and as high quality as possible. This is a slide that confuses a lot of people. There are truly nearly 400 million possible combinations of formula, and the manufacturing device that we have, which I'll show you in a second, can actually manufacture that one formula for that one person accurately. The reason there are nearly 400 million possible combinations, though, has nothing to do with the ingredients themselves. It has to do with the 18 SNPs that we have. There are 18 variants that we look for on 16 different genes, and those 18 variants on the final report come back in one of 3 ways. The optimal version of the gene has been inherited from both parents, which is a condition that we show with a green symbol. If one of the variants is suboptimal from one of the parents, it comes back as a yellow symbol. And if both of the parents passed on the suboptimal version with this particular SNP that we're looking for, it would come back with a red symbol. And the simple math here is that 18 SNPs with 3 possible outcomes of each, the mathematics in terms of the number of possible combinations of greens, yellows, and reds is 3 to the 18th power, which is 387 million and some odd thousand different combinations. So that's what derives the formula of the product for that specific individual. It's available in 2 different forms. The jar on the left contains 300 capsules that would be taken at a rate of 10 a day, generally 5 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon, although there are situations where people take 10 at once. Some people can tolerate them with no food. Lots of people have to have some food on their stomach in order to be able to take them without any stomach upset, because there's just a massive amount of nutrition in this. The jar on the right is a powdered form. It's simply not capsulated. It comes with a little measuring scoop, and you would put a scoop in a smoothie or blender, or mix it in with whatever you wanted to consume it. The 1 scoop would be the equivalent of the 5 capsules, and then 1 scoop in the afternoon would be your 2 doses per day. This is the device that actually does the manufacturing. This is an extraordinary device. The hoppers that you see along the sides at the top each contain the formulas that address one specific SNP. So the customer's jar goes down the center of this device, and if they have a yellow, that hopper will dispense the exact amount to the microgram of what's needed in the jar. If it's red, that same hopper would put twice the amount of the combined ingredients from that specific SNP support into the jar. If it's green, it skips it, and it simply goes down through the center of this device. In the yellows, it deposits, the red it deposits, the green it skips. It takes 15 seconds to get to the end, where it's mixed with the rest of the base ingredients that bring everybody's formula up to the exact same standard final amount that will be the equivalent of the 300 capsules. This entire process from start to finish to blend this formula is 15 seconds. So this one device is capable of doing 100,000 patients a month. There's a second device already on order for delivery and setup within about 90 to 120 days. And there's a third one of these devices that is scheduled for delivery in 8 or 10 months, which has double the number of hoppers for substantially more refinement in terms of this and future products. Bottom line is, this is part of our presentation at the consumer level, because we don't want people to think of this as a treatment product. This is not treating the product in the way that a drug would treat. The wise will anticipate what their body will do with the product. What we're doing is providing nourishment that people heretofore didn't have a way of knowing they needed. And their genes and their variants literally tell us that there are specific ingredients that will better support their health in those specific targeted areas. All we're doing is providing the nutrients to the body, and the magic that's occurring is because the body's going to function better when it has the fuel that it specifically needs for that individual. The company is very consumer friendly and very consumer centric. They've produced a beautiful series of videos that honor this uniqueness. In all of these various videos on the subject of snow and leaves and sand and star and butterflies and shells all represent the fact that we are all unique and our nutritional needs are unique. And so why would we not want to provide that unique nutrition to our body? So we're going to just take a minute here and look at one of these videos just to show you the kind of corporate culture that we're dealing with. This is the one that's on the snowflakes.
Modern technology wasn't so modern when it gave us the first images of snowflakes. For the first time, we saw the beauty of nature's creation, and the secret was revealed. No matter how many times we look, no matter how many snowflakes we see, when the same atoms, the same molecules that give us so much frozen white wonder come together, no two snowflakes are exactly the same. Each snowflake created by random design of Mother Nature's chance, each one created by divine choice. Just like all of us, made up of the same elements, the same molecules, yet each one uniquely different. You and the snowflake, unique by chance, divine by choice.
Okay, real quick, just a review. Step 1 is to buy the U-Start kit. Step 2 is to register it and pay for the actual test with the coupon. Step 3 is to receive your results and the nutrition following that, which would be the customized supplement for that individual. That basically is the end of the consumer presentation, and we're going to make a transition here because that was the consumer product. And when we started introducing this to the healthcare professionals, I think the big question was, whether or not this product was expected or being presented to be the end-all and be-all of nutrition for patients. And the point we have to make very clear to healthcare providers is no, that is not the case. This program was designed to be able to provide the very maximum amount of nutritional value to the very largest number of people in a standardized fashion and yet retain the ability to be so highly customized. However, there is a level of customization that we can't do that healthcare providers can do. And just as an example, let me just say that if we have one person who has a genetic test who's 18 years old and another person who has the genetic test who's 80 years old, our system by definition cannot tell the difference. They can only respond to that genetic profile. The one person may have significant variants that could lead to significant health problems over the decades to come in their life, whereas the 80-year-old person may already be experiencing many or most or all of those things from their 80 years of living with those variants without any ability to understand the variants or to be able to address them prophylactically earlier. The healthcare provider can do that. And so one of the aspects of the new program that we're going to have is the ability of the healthcare provider to further refine the formula in the best interest of their patient. Now, what I'm going to do at this point is I want to introduce to you a very dear friend of mine who has been on this incredible journey with me for the better part of the 10 years I've been in the program, Dr. Jerome Dixon. He has firsthand experience in his practice with the product. He also has degrees in nutrition when he tells you his background. So he's used nutrition in his healthcare practice for decades, which is something that's fairly unique in our healthcare system. Nutrition has typically not been taught in medical school and has not been used in practice simply because our healthcare system has evolved to not really focus on wellness. It really has focused on what are you here to have fixed as opposed to what can we do to keep you well and to make you even better, to last even longer with even fewer problems. We don't have a reimbursement structure that typically accommodates that. We don't have a system that's really focused on it historically in the past. And we're hoping this is the beginning of a transition where that will become a significant part of the future. Anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce to you Dr. Jerome Dixon, and I want him to be able to tell you firsthand about what's coming with this program for practitioners and what he sees as its value as an actual real practitioner in the field who has used nutrition and has used this product for many years with patients in the real world. Dr. Dixon, are you unmuted?
I am unmuted, Joel.
All right, here you go.
All right. Get me up there wherever you need me. I can start talking.
The floor is yours.
Okay, let me first thank everybody for showing up and getting on this call because I think it's really important. Let me just give you a quick background. My journey in nutrition started back in the 70s. Back in the 70s and 80s, did my first degree in dietetics, did my master's in nutritional biochemistry, had every intention of becoming a PhD biochemist, just like Jeffrey Bland is today. And I took a different course than him. I got pretty frustrated with the medical system because at that time, back in the early 80s, the AMA public policy statement was there is no diet and disease connection. And the U.S. federal government's public policy statement was there is no diet and disease connection at all. And I was pretty frustrated about that. And in my father's wisdom, he was one of the original organic gardeners of the time when organic gardening was a newspaper, not a magazine or a journal. And we were picking beans in the garden, and I was frustrated and kind of venting on him about the ignorance of medicine and where medicine was going, was totally ignoring what I was doing and all the data we had. And he looked at me and said, Jerome, who made the rules of baseball? And I looked at him and said, Dad, I'm not talking about baseball. I'm talking about nutrition and about medicine. And he said, no, just answer the question. And I said, well, it's, I'm not sure. I didn't play baseball. I like to watch the Reds because we grew up around Cincinnati. And I said, but I don't know. It's maybe the umpires, maybe the players, maybe the owners, but it's certainly not the fans. And he looked at me and he said, sounds like you're a fan of medicine. And he went back picking these beans. And I realized that if I was going to change medicine, I had to get in the middle of it. And so that's when I applied to medical school, became an osteopath because at that time, they were the only people teaching nutrition in the medical programs. And actually, when I interviewed at a number of MD institutions I've got accepted to, they actually, during the interview, looked at me and said, isn't nutrition a really weird degree to be applying to medical school with? So that kind of tells you the environment I lived in for many years. But when I got to the osteopathic programs, they embraced it. I was able to carry that knowledge throughout my medical training, all the way through residency and into my practice. I've been training residents and students my 30 years in practice. And during that time, because I did nutrition, I had a lot of students wanting to learn that, but it was very difficult for most medical students coming through my practice to realize that there was this whole body of knowledge that they had to learn that they weren't being taught in school. Our chiropractic colleagues and naturopathic colleagues are much more abreast in that nutritional realm. And I hope some of the people on the phone on the Zoom tonight may be in that category, because this kind of a product definitely fits into that venue so much better. But even in the medical venue, if you're an MD or a DO on the call, keep in mind that what I really like about this whole product is in the past, my students had to start to learn very slowly and methodically, about functional medicine and how to do it. And it was a very long, time-consuming, tedious, expensive journey because they had to do a lot of CME. This takes all the guesswork out of it. This allows a practitioner coming right out of residency to be able to get actively involved in targeted nutrition for their patient at a very minimal cost to the patient for what it provides the patient, and makes the doctor very targeted at a wellness program. So I think that this program, without a doubt, is the best program that I've seen to be able to allow anybody whether they do nutrition already or they don't do nutrition at all, can actually start doing nutrition with their patients at a very grassroots level to really impact wellness in their patients. So I really feel that this is where I think this needs to go and why it needs to go into medicine. I like what the company's done on their branding and marketing and idea of this company. But the other things I like about what they've done is there's a lot of companies. This is a direct marketing company to the public. A lot of us know different terms about that. It's MLM, multi-level marketing, direct sales marketing, whatever the term you've used and grown up with. It has always been that I've run across those companies. They would always make customers pay more than if you join their company. And so that would force customers, in my mind, to join something they didn't want to join. What I really like about what ÜFORIA has done here is they have flat priced their product, whether you're a customer at this level or whether you want to join and market them what they call their nutritionists. There's no benefit to doing that. The only benefit is if you really want to do this as a business, because the customer gets it exactly at the same price. So they didn't structure this company to force people, or what I consider my patients, to force them to do something they don't.
Dr. Dixon, we lost you.
Joel, I'm sorry, I didn't silence my phone and I got zapped out again. I apologize. That happened in the past. Start back over. So anyway, so one of the things I really like is that they don't do that. They flat priced their product for everybody. It's important for what I think is a professional, because I don't want to market something to a client or a customer that makes them feel like they have to join something they don't want to join. So that is for people that want to join at this level. But what's more important to me is that, by the way, sorry guys, that's my 11-year-old daughter trying to buzz in on me, so I apologize. What is more important to me is that what we're working on behind the scenes, once again, I apologize. What this company's doing behind the scenes is very important, and that is they are working on a medical version of this. Joel just presented a very good synopsis of what the public version is. And what we're literally looking at for professionals is that there'll be a version of this that we can actually add to and manipulate to treat our patients in a medical realm. Once again, this product for the public end is just a wellness product. It is designed to maintain wellness. So it actually works, in my opinion, better in young people, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, before they have any disease. Where I deal, I'm a geriatrician too. So when I deal with my 80-year-old, as Joel mentioned, or my 70-year-old, or somebody 60 years old who may have medical problems, it's without a doubt a design that doesn't apply to some of the aging processes. So what we're working towards is a system where I'll allow a healthcare practitioner like myself that has already done further testing on somebody, and you want them to be on a product like this as a base product, but we also want to give a healthcare practitioner in the future the ability to add extra boosts to their product. Let's just use vitamin D as an example, because I think it's a very good example. VDR gene is one of the genes we use. And there's a formula that is for that is designed for a healthy immune system and a healthy musculoskeletal system. But it's going to put in a boost that's based on the genetics of the person. It doesn't know, the consumer brand doesn't know whether the person is deficient or not. But you as a clinician can test that, and you know that yes or no, they are normal or they're not normal. Well, let me tell you my experience. When somebody has a VDR gene that has a single SNP defect or a double SNP variant, or we should say variant, not defect, a double SNP variant, the majority of them, 90% of them, if they've never been treated by a clinician, are deficient, okay? A one variant, you need so much vitamin D to keep them normal. A double variant, you need so much vitamin D to keep them normal. That's what the product does now. But if they're already deficient and their vitamin D is 15 or 12 or 20, way below normal, it doesn't give that product, the consumer product, a way to boost it up. What we have to do now, what I have to be doing now as I work with this product, is have them take extra vitamin D with it. What we're working on for the company to present to healthcare practitioners is we'll be able to get on the computer and add boosts of whatever we need in different realms, whether that be more vitamin D, whether that be more L-methylfolate, whatever it may be that we need in those boosts. As long as it provided in one of the boosts, we can actually add extra boosts to the formula to build it up for that patient. And you may do it for 3 months, you may do it for 6 months, you may do it for a year, but you'll have the ability to do it for so long and then adjust it back down until you feel like you've got them where their maintenance needs to be, and then you can maintain that product at a maintenance level for that individual. That is more of a clinically driven product that Joel has been working extensively with the founders of the company and the management team of the company to make that available to us healthcare practitioners. I don't know the timing of it, but I do know Joel pushes them to the limit on trying to bring that to us as soon as he can. It also has provided the opportunity for physicians that if they don't want to get involved in kind of the direct marketing portion of this company, I personally have no problems with that because I think they've structured it well. The patient has complete control of the shipping dates. They have no incentive to join it, something that they don't want to. They just get a good price product for the cost of making it and for manufacturing and shipping it. And actually a lot cheaper than they could ever do or I could ever reproduce from off-the-shelf products in my office, which I've been trying to do for 20 to 30 years. So if anybody on the call has a problem with that kind of a marketing structure, what Joel and the management team is working on is a way that we could have as clinicians what we call a white labeled product where it would actually be your product. It would be shipped with your label on it, with your clinic's name on it, or with your group's name on it, whatever you wanted to put on it, and it would be available just to your patients. So that is coming in the future, that you'll be able to do that and work with Joel. You'll be able to actually buy so many units of the, let's say the starter kit at a discounted price, so many units of nutrition at a discounted price. And you literally as a clinician would be given the sole responsibility of pricing it at whatever price point you thought you could get for it and whatever profit margin you wanted to make from it. So it would not be controlled by the company. The only thing that the company would be doing for you would be the manufacturing, the labeling, and basically you'd buy it at a wholesale price. And then you could retail it at whatever price you wanted. So if you wanted to make a 20% markup, you could. If you wanted to make a 50% markup, you could. If you wanted to make a 100% markup, you could, depending on the clientele that you're working with, because everybody has different clientele. And in fact, you could even do it inside of a research project if you wanted to do it in some form or fashion that way. So because it will be a totally isolated kind of product as a healthcare practitioner. That's exciting to me because in the vision that I have for this company is we will be doing some research with this, and it's unique research. It's unique research that's never been done before because it would have to obviously be an open label product because you can't do a genetic product that's not open label based on somebody's genetics. It's unethical to give them a placebo. But it would be totally groundbreaking because we could team together as a group of physicians, and we'd be able to provide this data to the company of every individual as a case study into a multi-center study and do meta-analysis on, let's say, just one SNP variant and come up with some very clear data showing that addressing the good example would be the aldosterone synthase gene that we were talking about earlier that Dr. Myers, a friend of mine, did that video on. If we could just look at that one gene and show how the ingredients in this product could lower blood pressure in people, that moves science ahead so fast because we take each of these genetic variants and show how nutrition can impact not just the variant in a wellness model, but actually in a medical model. Everything from cholesterol lowering to blood pressure management to blood sugar management, and the list goes on, and healthy immune system. So I'm also appealing to my colleagues in this video, or I want to say video, this call, to everybody on the call, to one, get involved for your own personal need, okay? Because I'm taking the product, and I've taken it and not taken it, and believe me, there's a huge difference from taking it and not taking it. And I know quite a bit about nutrition, and it's what's surprising to me is how many pills less I need to take. It doesn't mean this is my end-all product. Joel's said that over and over again. This is a micronutrient product. This is not a cannabinoid supplement. This is not an essential sugar supplement. It's not an essential protein supplement. It's not an essential fatty acid supplement. So a macronutrient supplement it is not, but it is a highly refined micronutrient supplement that we can all use. And once the medical model comes out, we can all get involved on the medical end to actually add different boost structures to an individual patient formula, so as to better treat them, so they don't have to take more and more other pills outside of the formula, which makes it more cost effective for our care of the patient. Joel, I have a question. Did I touch on everything that you wanted, and did you need me to touch on anything else? Because normally you generate questions as I'm talking.
I want to just touch on one thing that you said about the ability to add boost to the product where it's clinically appropriate. There is a flip side to that coin, though, for the clinicians, and that's the ability to remove a boost or a group of ingredients if it's problematic, if there's a potential for a drug interaction, if there's a sensitivity of some sort, if for whatever reason it's just not appropriate in a particular care plan because of other issues, you have that flexibility as well. Even though none of the normal food allergens are in this product, we do from time to time run into people who simply can't take it because they do have a sensitivity to some ingredient that's more or less obscure. Some of the ingredients in this product are things most people don't even think of as food. And so it's certainly possible to have reactions to those sorts of things that are not anticipatable. And so some people just can't take the product. But one of the advantages of the new version of this program is the ability to refine it by taking things out as well as adding things in to make it that much more available to that many more people. I think you covered everything, Dr. Dixon. What I'd like to do is to open this up to anybody that has any questions. If
let me do one other thing. I did really quick right before you started. I just want to run through because you showed those snips, but you didn't really talk much about them. Let me go through the variants and talk about what is in this product for somebody that may not know that. There may be people that, but there may not be other people. I mentioned the VDR gene. That's the vitamin D receptor gene. There's two genes in here that we deal with healthy cholesterol. The apolipoprotein B gene, most everybody understands. That's the lipid molecule that's going to make your LDL molecule. The PON1 gene is a gene that actually is a really interesting gene as you study it. It's actually an antioxidizing system on the HDL molecule that antioxidizes the LDL lipid molecule so it doesn't become so atherogenic. And now we know that that exists. We know how to help formulate that to make that work better. And that really impacts people's healthcare. One of the things that I realize is that these people that I've had in my practice that had really fairly high LDLs that would never really want to take anything for them, and they'd still never get heart disease. I understand now that I've done genetics on them. The reason is they have a very active PON1 gene, and they antioxidize the heck out of the LDL molecule so it doesn't become atherogenic. And it's a really neat model as you start to learn about that. And then we have the mitochondrial synthase, ATPase synthase. So literally how you manufacture ATP, who makes ATP efficiently, who doesn't, and how we can help mitigate that. And then all the CoQ10, the glutathione, superoxide dismutase, those are all impacted, we all know, from immunity and healthcare because they're all antioxidant genes. But one of the things that people forget, that you need the endogenous antioxidants within the mitochondria to actually protect the manufacturing of energy from the Krebs cycle. And if somebody doesn't have enough of their endogenous antioxidants in production within the mitochondria, what the cell does is downregulate energy production. It has to, because if it doesn't downregulate ATP production, it will destroy itself. So what happens with people when we find that they have these SNP variants and we give them the right supplementation, they actually generate more ATP, not just because of the one gene that is directly connected to ATP synthase, but actually because you can generate more endogenous antioxidant production. And when you do that, that allows every mitochondria in every cell of the body to generate more ATP. And that's one of the universal things that you'll see with people that have these SNP variants. All of them come back saying that their energy level is better, they're sleeping better, they regenerate faster. So that's included in this. And then we're looking at a lot of the inflammatory, C-reactive protein, interleukin 6, TNF alpha gene. So all those inflammatory genes and how they affect the immune system, how they're infecting the whole inflammatory model. So when you're doing the antioxidants and actually regulating a lot of these inflammatory cytokines within the body, then all of a sudden you're balancing those two systems, and a lot of the inflammatory problems that we see in our medical practices on a daily basis start to calm down. And when you calm down people's inflammation at the genetic level, at the cellular level, then all the other things that we deal with the leaky guts and people that are intolerant to things and intolerant to foods and intolerant to drugs for that matter, all of a sudden it starts calming down because their immune system seems to be working better. Their repair, protection, and maintenance mechanisms within their bodies works more efficiently. Okay, you throw a little bit of the cannabinoids in there, and it even works even better. And then all the methylation of all the B vitamins are in there. That's your MTFHR, your MTRR. Those genes are in there, so that helps us with trying to figure out who needs those and who doesn't. And what's nice about the product, it figures it out for you. I mean, and you can literally, in my lab, when I use either Quest, I use both Quest and I use LabCorp. Literally, you do one or two of these genes and you're talking about $300 or $400 or more just for one or two of the genes. Well, they get the whole panel for $99. So there's nothing that I found out there that's more cost effective for a clinician to be using in their practice if they want to look at these genes. And then, well, I'm going to stop there. But the epoxide gene, just people knowing whether or not we can counsel, just if you have that one gene, whether or not you put anything in the product at all. But when I know that I got somebody that has a double SNP variant on the epoxide, then you gotta just tell them, you can't be a smoker anymore. You can't eat charbroiled meats anymore. You can't be, you're gonna have problems with all the hydrocarbons. So you got to really start looking at whether or not you need to start a detox program on a regular basis. Do you do a detox only 6 months or every quarter, or do you do it every other month? And talk about whether or not you need to really be kind of nudging those clients or patients in the right direction, because you now know that they have a dysfunctional detoxification mechanism, not in the liver. I mean, obviously that gene is in the liver and that mechanism works in the liver, but that's happening in every cell in their body, that they can't detox at the cellular level. And so we really need to support them and guide them on a counseling level, that they really have to live a clean lifestyle more than somebody that can detoxify those things at a much better and a much more efficient level. So Joel, I'm going to kick it back to you and you can open it up for some questions, but I just wanted to run through that because if the clinicians hadn't had a time to look at this and they just got invited to the call, I think they really need to know how ubiquitous this program really is and how all those systems interplay for wellness and for the way we treat patients on a regular basis.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dixon. If there's anybody on the call that has a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can send it through the chat tool. I see we actually have one. Is it possible to increase Dr. Dixon's screen? Well, it's a little late. I'm sorry I didn't read that earlier. I thought I had him.
Guys. It's all right. We saw him up in the corner.
Okay. Also, I want to make sure that there's a point here that I'm sensitive to, because a lot of these types of programs, and there are copies of this program, nobody does a complete personalization of a formula, an actual compounded formula for a single human being. But we were just the first company here. We're not the only company here. There are companies that do DNA testing, and they do provide combinations of standardized supplements rather than an individualized supplement. But the thing I'm most sensitive to is that people not interpret what we're saying is that this is a silver bullet. This is not a silver bullet. There are lots of lifestyle issues, questions, and decisions that patients have to make. This is just one of the important factors. It's the genetic component that we historically did not have access to. Now we have the information available cost effectively. Now we have the tools to start supporting it. But there's still a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work for us as individuals to do, for your patients to do, for you to do as clinicians. And you know, I hope everybody understands that this is a starting point, not an end point. And to reinforce that even more, there are literally dozens of genes that we've already identified that fit our model very well, that will lead either to refinements in this program or to additional products for this program. There's already a substantially expanded cardiovascular specific panel. There's a senior men's, senior women's panel that better addresses the age variability here. There's been a huge expression of interest in pediatric dosaging, which would have to be worked out based on not only weight but also age range differences because of the changes that pediatric bodies are undergoing as opposed to adult bodies, which are fairly stable. There's discussion of products that are specifically tuned to athletes that would be targeting more the issues such as performance and recovery and endurance and strength and all of the things that are more relevant to an athlete for a specific period of time. So this is really just a beginning, but it's an extraordinarily exciting beginning. We're getting extraordinarily great clinical feedback and clinical responses from the product. And so I think it's as exciting a beginning as I've ever seen in a whole new area of health and wellness. So does anybody else have any questions that you would like to address to myself or Dr. Dixon or anybody on the call for that matter?
Joel?
Yes.
I was wondering, you were mentioning that we don't have like a hard date for the practitioner to come out. Do you have any estimate whatsoever? You know, just because
Yes.
I know when we discussed it at the launch, you know, it was really exciting, and I've spoke to colleagues about it, and they kind of want to know when it's happening, and I can't give them even an estimate. So an estimate would even be nice.
Mid 2019.
Okay.
So it's close. It's actively being constructed. Software is being worked on. The changed website. The website has to be far more functional, far more practical, far more menu driven than the consumer oriented site, which is really more about, you know, the impression and the visualization. In the practitioner world, it's all about making it functional so that your staff can use it, so that you can access data and work the thing properly. But all of the software is in progress. All of the website development's in progress.
And Joel, would you mind just touching on what might be included in the practitioner portal? Like, what are your thoughts on like what functionalities it can have? I know they were talking about possibly like a chat or a discussion aspect where practitioners can go back and forth, share ideas, ask questions, things like that. Well, so what? Just in a quick summary of what the practitioner portal might look like.
It's all on the table. One of the aspects of it that's going to be an absolute is that we have to have a very, very substantial amount of clinical documentation on the gene functions, the SNP functions, the ingredient selections, and all of that sort of stuff. Because as practitioners, especially if you're going to modify a formula, you're taking responsibility for the impact of those changes on a human being. And so you have to have all of the support documentation. So that's absolutely mandatory. You do have to have a completely different enrollment process for a patient because you need a different consent form, because that consent form has to authorize you or your practice to be able to receive not only their genetic report, but also to have access to their formula, to have the right to change the formula. So there's some legal issues there with the consent form. You will be able to log into patients' records routinely. You will be able to see their report and print it or email it to the customer. They will be able to log into your website as well. There'll be a patient portal component to your website as well as a practitioner component where you'll get into the heavy stuff. The patient is only going to see their records and, basically the overview types of stuff about the program that's available to the consumers. You will also be able to log into the patient's records to modify the formulas. You'll be able to log into start or stop or change delivery dates because you're essentially selling your product to your patient. So you have to have complete control over that. So if somebody needs a refill, it's up to you and your system or your people, your staff to order the refill. So that's just kind of an overview.
Okay.
The chat tool I think is great. It would really be wonderful if we could create a community spirit among practitioners so that they could literally communicate with each other. I don't know if that's viable through the portal or not. I don't know if that would become cumbersome or overwhelming, frankly, if we wind up with literally tens of thousands of practitioners in the program. That's just one of those things we'll have to experiment with.
Well, one of the things I dream of having is further CME for all of us, continuing education, even maybe putting somewhere in the back office, educational videos on different SNP variants, just because I vision there'll be people that get involved in this very early that already have a lot of understanding of what we're doing. But it's not going to take long. Give us 6 months, a year doing this with people, and we're going to have a lot of clinicians jumping on board that have little or no training at all. But they just understand that they really want to be part of this and be part of this where nutrition is moving towards. And that there'll be a workload that we'll need to put in there for them to do, to educate themselves. It won't be the workload that I had to go through or a lot of other people maybe on the call went through to learn all the nutrition that they understand today. But it will be a very more, what I would consider more efficient workload at understanding what the company's doing with the different variants, and then stepping up from that one, what you can do as a clinician above and beyond that. And looking forward to working with everybody that gets involved, because I think that will be a group effort of the clinicians working together to pull that off.
All righty. Got a couple of questions here I want to get to. One is how the doses are determined. The easiest answer I can give you for that is that we look at the science that is involved with those particular ingredients that are selected, and we use the therapeutic doses that were shown to have efficacy in the clinical trials. It gets kind of complicated when you have multiple SNPs on a single gene. However, there's good clinical documentation out there that shows the impact on a specific SNP. So it's not really that complicated to have two SNPs and have two different responses to the same SNP. As I said at the beginning of this, though, one of the things that people have to understand going into this is that this is a beginning rather than an end, and that this is a product that started off with a great deal of an experimental overtone to it, where the scientists that developed the product spent 1994 to 2008 doing nothing but research to compile what they thought was going to be a wellness product that was simply going to keep people healthier longer, and they were absolutely blown away by the clinical impacts that it had right out of the box with people. And that brings up the next question that I actually want to send back to Dr. Dixon to discuss, because the question is, can you speak to the effects that your patients have experienced with the customized formulation?
Sure. And I think that, Joel, that original version you didn't mention only had 12 variants. We only
12, right.
And then up to 18, and down the road, who knows how many we're going to be adding on, or like you said, other different products. So I think it's a growing field of medicine and nutrition, or nutrigenomics is a growing field that's just going to keep getting more exciting as we study more and more on it. As far as patients going, universally, well, this is what I tell my patients when they say, what should I expect? And the first thing I tell them is, I'm not sure. And they say, what do you mean you're not sure? I said, because I haven't looked at your genes yet. So until they do their genetic test, you don't really know what their experience is going to be, because you don't know what variants they're going to have. What I can tell you is, based on their variants, there are some variants that you will feel, and there are some variants you're not going to feel. unless you're deficient in vitamin D, and if you're not, and we put a boost on your vitamin D, if you're not deficient, you're not going to feel it. But if you're deficient, you'll feel that deficiency go away because those deficiency symptoms will disappear over time. And in a clinician's hand, with this new model that we're looking at, it'll disappear a lot quicker because we'll be able to put more boosts in the product and get them to a therapeutic dose quicker. But there are some things that we do feel, okay? And your MTHFR genes, your MTRR genes, those are genes that the company in their marketing material have focused on homocysteine, which is it is great at bringing down homocysteine, and all the homocysteine research is focused on cardiovascular disease. But what we also know is that it's hugely dependent on mental health disease, and everything from dementia to depression to seasonal affective disorder. And so people that have those variants and they use this product, they all feel better. Their mood gets better. They get along better. Their husbands say the women are healthier and more cordial. The wives say the same thing. Their sleeping patterns get better. That's a universal thing I see with a lot, depending on which variant they have. A lot of people come back and that they're resting better. One of the things I personally know is, I know this to be a fact for me, is I'm regenerating quicker. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm a high-end, high-maintenance guy. I'm sleeping 5 to 6 hours a night. I have for over 35 years. And that's just who I am. But what I'm noticing now, since I got back on this product, because there was a time where I didn't have this product. Joel was trying, but he couldn't keep it in my hands. So I was off of the product for a while, and I had to go back to my old way of doing things. And when I got back on this product, one of the things I noticed is that I started waking up before my alarm clock went off at 4:45. I was waking up before my alarm clock and looking at it thinking I overslept. Now that means a lot to me on somebody that gets as little sleep as I. So I know my cellular regeneration is increased with this product based on some of those SNP variations. So, and I think that's the big thing that most people can expect, is that there are so many of these variants that play into the amount of ATP that is produced in the cell. And if you increase ATP production in every cell in your body, every function improves. All your glandulars go up. All your mental health things changes. All your neurotransmitters are easy to manufacture. All your detoxification, it goes into hyper mode. So just the fact that there are a handful of these things that are revving up your ATP production at the cellular level changes the dynamics of how people feel. And I hope, and you might have wanted, okay, let me get a little bit more specific. Okay. And now, because I keep thinking I have to speak compliance. Don't have to speak compliance. Okay. No. Hypertension. I got people coming in and their blood pressures are dropping. I'm backing off on blood pressure medicines. We've seen cholesterol levels drop, and I'm a clinician, so I use statins. I'm seeing people that need less statins. Okay. I see people that had statin side effects, okay, coming back and saying they aren't aching anymore. They don't have the myalgias anymore. Even though they had severe cardiovascular disease, they had known triple vessel disease, they needed to be on their statin because there wasn't any other way for them to get the levels that they are. All of a sudden, they're taking a product like this, and now they're not having those kind of side effects. So it's making their medications, which makes all the sense to me in the world, that when you get optimal nutrition, every drug we give, every drug I prescribe is much more efficient at what it does. One of the biggest problems I always have seen in research, the reason we had to do research of drugs and we would actually accept drugs that only had a 30% or 50% effectiveness is because we weren't addressing the drug at the genetic level. Well, pharmacogenomics is changing all that. I do that in my office as well. And so we're able to target drugs better. What this is actually doing is whatever drug we're using is physiologically working more efficiently because you're bringing up cellular metabolism to a whole new level for them. So any medication I prescribe works better for them. So as a clinician that does prescribe medicine, I realize there may be clinicians on the phone that do not do that on the call. But that doesn't matter. What you can tell your clients and your patients is that when they do this, whatever medicine they are on, they need to work with their clinician if they start having side effects and back off on the medicine. It's not that you back off on nutrition. For God's sake, that's what's making them well again. And they don't need their medicines. So a good clinician, any doctor out there that comes in and they're having a side effect from a drug, they're going to back off on the drug. They're not going to tell somebody to quit being healthy. Okay. And so I think we need to always emphasize that to our colleagues, that what we're going to do here is going to change the way we do medicine, because it's going to make every drug we ever prescribe work much more efficiently and much more effectively. And so we have to watch that, because when that happens, sometimes you have more side effects. And that's what I've also noticed. It's side effects in drugs, not because drugs are necessarily innately bad, but we sometimes prescribe them inappropriately, and we prescribe them at way too high levels. And we don't use a synergistic balance of drugs. We just hammer people with one drug and keep going up on it. So I think those are the things that I've noticed the most, and hopefully that helps some of the people on the call. But I really think that we're going to need to coach people that drugs are going to be much more effective, much more efficient, and people that get on this product early may not even need drugs until later on in life. I really think there's a term that Joel coined, which I really like, which is well span. We're going to change the well span of America. You know, right now I see people coming into my office in their 40s, and they come in and they're saying they're falling apart. Well, if that's true, if they feel like they're falling apart at 40, that means they had a well span of 20 years, from age 20 to 40. What I consider an adult is about 20 years old when they mentally mature. Okay, that's a 20-year well span before they need to see a doctor because they feel sick. That's terrible. Okay, we're failing the American public if that's what we're doing. If we're expecting that's good health care, we need to have that well span to 40 or 50 or 60 years. Well, we aren't seeing people until they're 60 or 80 or 90 years old and keeping them well. And this is the kind of product that's going to keep people well and out of our offices in the sense of sickness care, but into our offices because they want to stay well. And the American public finally gets that. The U.S. government finally gets that. Medicare is now paying physicians to keep their patients well. It's in a bonus structure, but they're actually paying doctors if they can prove their patients are well, staying out of the hospital, staying out of the emergency room. They get bonus checks at the end of the year. So even our federal government is finally catching on that wellness is a much more cost-effective program for the healthcare of America. And that's why I'm excited about this, and that's why I'm integrally involved in this. So get involved with me, and let's get excited, and let's tell our colleagues about it.
Did you mention diabetes?
I mentioned good sugar because I thought I was still compliant, but diabetes, yes.
Yeah, we do have some physicians who've actually lowered or even eliminated insulin dependence.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of that metabolism thing that we're talking about, that it changes their metabolism again. The biomarkers, just the one ingredient, the AC11, we didn't mention the AC11, Joel. AC11 is one of the ingredients that's actually in pre-nutrition, and it's also in everybody's nutrition. Yep. At the dose that was researched, and the research, it's a wonderful product. If you ever look it up. It has, I think, over 13 patents now. It has great research that shows reversal of all the biomarkers of aging within 18 months to 2 years of using AC11. It literally has shown without a doubt clinical lengthening of telomeres, repair of DNA damage, not repair of your SNP variants, but repair of the damage to the DNA from wear and tear and hydrocarbon damage and things like that. So that's just one of the ingredients that's going to be in everybody's product. And so if we're just putting that one ingredient that's already been clinically shown to lengthen telomeres, repair DNA damage, improve the immune system, and actually reverse all the biomarkers of aging, holy cow, just the pre-nutrition product could have started a whole company by itself. But that is just where this company started to get people's system revved up to healing, and then actually giving them exactly what they needed based on their genetics. It really is breakthrough science that all of us should take an advantage of it. If not on our clinical level, if you don't feel comfortable at least using it with patients yet, at least start using it for yourself and start to see what kind of results you get for yourself. The other phenomenon that we noticed is we noticed that when people take this, they feel something the first few months, 3 months, 4 months. And then when you get into their they're maturing into the product, and they're at 6 months, 9 months on the product. I had patients coming back and talking about, I'm not sure if this is really working. And I say, why? It's like, well, I'm not feeling it like I used to. Well, as much as I tried to explain to them that they've reached a new level of wellness, and when you reach new wellness, when you're depressed and you get on an antidepressant, when you're not depressed anymore, you feel it. But 2 years down the road, when you're no longer depressed, you don't feel anything different but not depression. And a lot of these people feel better, and they weren't sure if the product was working. And they started looking at the money they were spending on it, because it was an open label kind of program. And I never pushed anybody to take it in the first place. And I said, well, if you really don't think it's working, stop the product if you don't think it's cost effective. And we had a phenomenal amount of people within a 2-month period come back and say, okay, I need to get back on it. I can feel the difference now. I can, I know I need it. I know it was doing something, but they needed to learn that. Okay. And as much as I told them and tried to educate them on an intellectual level, sometimes people have to experience the difference between feeling well and then getting off a product and not feeling well. As a clinician, I'm willing to do that because I have a good relationship with my patients. And I understand that you can't convince people. I try to talk to people about diet all the time. In fact, my patients call me a preacher. They say I preach to them about it. And I do. But sometimes, even though you preach that you don't get what you want, sometimes they have to take it and get off of it and feel it again, the difference between starting and stopping. And so you may have to do that, and that's okay as a clinician. We'll have that ability to do that with our patients. The public end, I think we're going to see the same thing. People are going to get off, and they're going to come back to the company and start up their automatic order, because just because they stop, they're still going to have access to start back in a month or 2 months. If I'm not correct, Joel, they'll still have access to get started.
Absolutely.
Back. So
they can start back in 2 weeks if they want.
Yeah, they have complete control over starting the shipping of their product. So we'll leave that portal open for them, because we really think that in our pilot program, people were starting and then they'd always come back. And Joel, you might be able to give a stat on how many people returned. Do you have a kind of a raw stat on when we saw that happening, how many people were returning?
It was very close to 100%.
I was going to say at least 80% of them would stop and they'd come back.
Retention on this product is astronomical, simply because people genuinely do feel better. They have significantly higher levels of energy, and their whole lives simply function better when their bodies are better supported. We got another couple of quick questions here before we wrap up tonight. One of them is about the current formulation not including vitamin D. That has changed. As of about 2 weeks ago, they're adding in the D, the K vitamins, and the calcium for the VDR boost. That does, by the way, technically make it not a vegan product, because the D is sourced it's derived from lanolin, which is sourced from sheep's wool. So even though it's vegetarian, because there's no harm being done to animals, it's not technically vegan because it's being sourced from animals. And they are looking at non-animal sources of vitamin D. So they may be able to get back to a completely vegan product. If you're green on the VDR, it's still vegan, because you're not going to get any of the vitamin D or K or calcium. So that's the current on that. Also, breakdown on the product. Are there any ingredients that are known to have interactions? And the answer is absolutely yes. And Dr. Dixon, if you'd like to mention the K vitamins.
Interactions, I'm not sure I'm following the question.
Well, drug interaction.
Oh, a drug interaction. Yeah, okay. Well, the easiest one would be, if you have vitamin K in your formula and you're on Coumadin. So if you're on Coumadin, it's going to affect Coumadin. However, with the person that I use Coumadin a lot in my practice, because I do geriatrics. And so what you just have to do is let them know if they're starting this product. When they start the product, they just have to make sure that their physician is following their levels appropriately and adjusting their dose. That happens all the time. Consistency is the key when you talk about vitamin K and Coumadin. It's not what we don't want them to do is eat salads 2 days a week and not the rest of the week. Since this is a supplement, physicians have never told their patients not to do supplements. In fact, there's actually vitamins out there. We have them. There's actually vitamins with no vitamin K. But I tell them to take whatever they're taking and be consistent. It's more about consistency. It's more about taking If you're going to take 10 a day, take 10 of these capsules a day. If you're only getting 5 in a day consistently, that's what they're doing. They just need to be consistent, because then we can adjust that. So yeah, there are definitely drug-to-drug or drug-to-nutrient interactions. There's quite a few of them. One of the biggest things that we see in drug-to-nutrient interactions is not like vitamin K and coumadin. Most of the drug-to-nutrient interactions happen in the gut. They do not happen in the blood vessels. Okay, vitamin K is different with regards to coumadin, because that is actually something that's happening within the integument of the system of the body. But most drug-to-nutrient interactions happen in the gut. So what you want to do is advise them to not take this supplement with their medications, okay, and take their medications away from their supplementation. And when they do that, there usually is not an issue with regards to nutrient-drug interactions, because the majority of drug-nutrient interactions happen in the gut, okay? There are some exceptions. Did I answer that question appropriately?
Yep, I think you did. And as a matter of fact, I'm a good example of that. I've been on levothyroxine for 40 years and will be on it for the rest of my life. And I simply have to take it at a different time of day than I take my supplements, because they don't play well together, but it doesn't stop me from doing them both if I do them correctly. Right. So there are some of those things to be aware of. The rule of thumb for the company and the official policy of the company is, if you're under a doctor's supervision for any reason, if you're taking a prescription drug, or if you're pregnant or lactating, you should take your formula and your genetic results and review it with that healthcare provider, because they're the ones that are responsible for that condition, and they're the ones that you want to help understand what's appropriate with regards to your supplementation, as well as your health issues and your drug regimen.
Joel, one last thing you might want to mention is, right now when they get their report, it has all the ingredients on that back page.
Yes.
It doesn't have cumulative. You might want to talk to them about, when we roll out the professional one, we hope to have a cumulative total of all the different ingredients at the bottom. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah. Yes, for the healthcare practitioner, we're going to have a different sort of analysis that actually accumulates certain key nutrients from all of the various sources. Some of the nutrients that people need to know about are found in multiple places in the formula. And so you need a way to compile all that together. We did that in the past, and we're going to be introducing that again in the future. So if you need a specific ingredient, you'll have the total that's in that formula at your fingertips. If someone takes a break from the product, how long before their information is deleted? It won't be deleted. There will be a delete button at some point for the customer. It would be their choice if they decided they not only didn't want to have anything to do with the product, but they really wanted their genetic information removed from the system. That is something that the consumer would control. But we don't remove their data, so they could come back a week, a month, a year, or a decade later, and we should still have their data on file as long as they haven't removed it. If physicians introduce other physicians, how does the residual income work? Because this is a direct selling or multi-level marketing company, even if a healthcare practitioner does the white label program, we would strongly advise you keep that MLM component of your practice open, because if you talk to other clinicians and you refer them to this program, you simply have the option of passing on essentially free money. It's overrides on all of their practice and all of practices that they may enroll in the program, and on and on. It doesn't mean you're an active MLMer. It simply means if you refer other clinicians to the program, it strikes me as odd that you wouldn't want the additional revenue that would go along with that. You certainly don't have to have it, but it would be logical for most people to want to continue that. Some of this was touched on, but I'm wondering about this product in use with thyroid issues. I'd like to know, eventually be insurance billable to patients with regard to genetic testing. We're looking into that. We're looking into, because our test does 663,000 SNPs, there is the possibility of being able in the healthcare channel at some point in the future to be able to extract the drug metabolism panel, to extract a cancer screening panel. There's all sorts of things that we should be able to do, and we may very well be able to pursue reimbursement through insurance companies. And we did find out that if healthcare practitioners actually prescribe or officially recommend this product to a consumer or a patient, they can deduct this from health savings accounts. So there are some savings already involved, but you should write it on a prescription pad or some formal document so they have it as documentation if they're challenged for their HSA expenditures. Thyroid issues, hormone issues, autoimmune issues, that's a conversation and a whole subject of a webinar in and of itself. Let me get some of these quick ones out of the way, and then Dr. Dixon, if you want to touch on those three big ones, at least to a minimal degree. Safe in pregnancy, as far as we are concerned and believe it should be, but the doctors involved in overseeing the pregnancy should have the final say. Show your report. Yes, I have no problem sharing my report with anybody. I routinely share it with healthcare practitioners who are interested in reviewing the program, because I want them to see the length and breadth of data that's available. And there's nothing about our SNPs or our genes in this program that really represents a risk to anybody legally or in insurance capacity if the information were released publicly. Women don't find out if they're pregnant until 7 weeks after. Donquai is listed as causing birth defects, really should not be in a wellness product. I appreciate the observation, and I will pass that on to the people that do the formulation.
Joe, I might just add that I think that it has to do with the quantity of Donquai, and I think that the quantity that we're using may be safe in the first trimester of pregnancy if you didn't know that you were pregnant. So I think that's the way I would address that one. Most people that are taking it over the counter are taking a lot higher doses of that, or just even one pill over the counter is a lot higher than what we're going to be using within the product for the SNP variant would be my first gesture, that it probably is not at the level. It's not like, just the studies that were done on that were probably at a lot higher doses than we're using in the product. So there's safety within the amount that we're using. We're using very targeted doses that were done in research. So, but I think you should pass on for us to look into further.
Well, and also, though, that does reinforce why we have the position that we have, that the healthcare provider should be included in the decision to take or not take this product under any of those circumstances, including
or to take it out.
Pregnancy and lactation.
Yeah, because once we have the professional brand, they could take it out. They could take that very variant out of the product as soon as they know they could. The next month it could be taken out.
Question about the number of SNPs we're testing. It's not several hundred SNPs. It's 663,000 SNPs. The report for this product is based on these 18 SNPs. Does the other SNP info stay saved in the patient's database? Yes. The reason for that is we realized if we introduce new products or expansions of this product, we were going to have to sell a retest to people to add the additional genes and SNPs, which didn't seem like a bad idea until we realized if we had 1 million patients and all of a sudden we needed to have 1 million people sending new swabs to the lab, that could pose a problem. And I think it's also an example of the good faith belief on the part of the owners of this company. They're actually spending more on the test than they need to because they believe in the value of having the additional information available for further improvement and expansion of the product and the introduction of additional products. It's going to be a very simple matter to ask a patient if they want, or a consumer, if they want to authorize the access of an additional 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 12 or however many SNPs for a new product or an expansion to an existing product. And that's a whole lot easier than having to have everybody buy kits or swabs and re-swab and retest. Can you access your own raw data? Not at this time. The question has been raised, and frankly, there's a cost issue there because what the consumer has truly legitimately paid for is access to the 18 SNPs, not access to the rest. We're not hiding the fact that we're testing the rest, but they've not paid for the rest of that test or access to that data. So that's simply one of those. We'll have to see how that shakes out. Share about how they save each formula sample for two. Yes. When a major manufacturer makes 1 million bottles of supplements to put on store shelves all around the world, if that's one production run, the FDA requires that they keep a sample of that production run on file for 2 years for traceability purposes, retesting purposes, et cetera, if there's any adverse reactions or contamination or that sort of thing that's experienced with the product in the field. If ÜFORIA does 1 million bottles of supplements, it has done 1 million different production runs. It literally has an FDA requirement to keep a sample on file for 2 years of every bottle of supplements produced for every individual, because every production run is different because it's a different formula. So there's an extraordinary commitment here. But this is also the main reason why we have no competitors, because people, the large companies think we're crazy to do what we're doing, and the small companies simply can't afford it, because this is not a simple process to do, where you have to inventory a sample of every single bottle of supplements for 2 years. If you want to come back just very briefly and touch on hormone issues, thyroid issues, and autoimmune issues in terms of how any of that relates to this product, Dr. Dixon?
Okay, yeah, so I'm not sure, it was kind of a broad question, but I'm not sure if they're asking if it was going to treat that. And it's not a hormonal product, so it's not going to help with hormones or that, but what it will do, and I've seen it do, is it helps with that whole metabolism issue, the metabolic issue. So whatever we're doing with natural hormone replacement or thyroid replacement, it's working better. That's one way. The other thing is I've noticed that when people get on this product, when they were talking about having more hot flashes and things like that, they were going through the change, and they get on a product like this, those symptoms tend to get abated. Okay. Now there's two ways of looking at that. You could say, well, they've just moved through menopause and it stopped. Or you could say they all of a sudden are moving the biomarkers in the other direction, and they may be actually salvaging some of their organ function, and it may be functioning again. I can't say that I've done enough clinicians or enough patients to say that which way is it happening. But I do know that people feel better, and some of those symptoms that are related to those conditions, particularly the hormonal issues, seem to get abated as they get on the product. My wife's a good example. I've been wanting her to do some natural hormone replacement, and now she's been on the product, and now she's pushing back, thinking that her symptoms are getting better, and now why does she need to have, the hormone replacement? And she maybe really doesn't want to do that anymore. So I think that it's affecting her in a different way. I don't know yet, because I haven't had an opportunity. I didn't get the opportunity to do pre-hormone testing and post-hormone testing. Would have been a great opportunity if I had that opportunity, but she didn't even come in and get the first set done. So now that she's feeling better and doesn't want them, I don't have my baseline. Back to the immunity, though, I think the immune system is definitely being helped by this product, and autoimmune conditions are definitely being helped. The one thing I will tell you as a clinician, and I advised somebody on this just recently that had ulcerative colitis, is I advise that person, because they had known ulcerative colitis, that this has upwards of up to 100 different ingredients from around the world in it. And that person may or may not have had any contact with those ingredients before. They may still have a leaky gut because of their ulcerative colitis. And a couple months ago, I talked to a Crohn's patient as well. And because they have that potential of having a leaky gut and waiting until their gut biome changes, because even the prebiotic has even the pre-nutrition has the prebiotic in it and the digestive enzyme. So it's actually designed to help that gut milieu change from the very beginning of starting the pre-nutrition. Until that healing process, I counseled them to start lower on their dose. Instead of taking the whole 10, I told them to slowly build up on it and see how their body reacts to it. I think that's a good clinical counseling method to do that. And I advised them that They had total control of their shipping. So if it looked like their product was going to ship, they can just postpone it a couple weeks if they hadn't used their product up, to go ahead and use that ability to govern the shipping of their product and slowly build into the product. I haven't had anybody that couldn't take it. I've had people that kind of just went gung-ho, and a couple things happen. Sometimes when you go gung-ho and your gut's not really healthy, you can actually have some GI side effects, some diarrhea and things like that. And back off, they adjust and they come back on. That even happened some with the prebiotic and the pre-nutrition. And then sometimes you have people that literally take all 10 starting off, and they get so much energy that they almost go manic. Okay. Now they're not manic, but their energy is so high. They're calling me and saying, I'm not sleeping. I'm bouncing off the walls. And I said, well, how's your maybe racy thoughts? No, I've just got all this energy. And I literally had to counsel them to back down a little bit, because they were literally, in my opinion, producing so much ATP so quickly that they didn't know how to handle that. And so I've counseled them to back off until they get adjusted, and then slowly creep back up to get back up to the 10. Why do I want to kind of push them to the 10? Because that's kind of where the research led us. Okay. There's a reason why there's 10 capsules. There's a certain amount of nutrition that's been followed by the research, that we're putting the same amount of these ingredients based on research studies into the product. So I'm always trying to work people back to that. Does that mean that 100% of everybody's clients and patients are going to be able to get there? Not necessarily. I mean, some people may only get to 8 a day, or some people may only get to 6 a day. I don't know as a clinician. All I can tell you that in working with the public brand and having people call me and email me and trying to work through some of these issues, everybody's unique. And that's why I really want a clinician brand, because those people can be really helped by working with a clinician to work through those difficult problems. Joel, did you have anything else to add on that, or any other insight?
No, I think you've covered it, and we really
need to get going.
Well, we need to start wrapping this up. We've already been at it for an hour and 40 minutes, and that's way longer than we'd expected or anticipated. There's 2 other real quick questions here. One of them is about the supplement manufacturing. Yes, our ingredients are to USP or national formulary standards if it's appropriate for those ingredients. And the last one is there any plan to sell the aggregated data? That's obviously a response to 23andMe selling 5 million people's aggregated DNA for $300 million to GlaxoSmithKline this last July. I want to just show you all very quickly the consent form. Those of you who have done this program, this is the consent form that you signed, whether you read it or not. And those of you who are not in the program at this point, this is the consent form that you or your patients would be signing. It's a very simple 1-page document. It does not include anything other than an explanation of what it is we're testing and why. And the reason for that is there's no gotchas here. In the 23andMe case, the actual consent form that they used was longer and more complex, and it had a section that said unless you opt out, you are agreeing to allow your genetic information to be shared without human identifiers for research purposes. And it sounded very altruistic, and who wouldn't want to help humanity? But what people didn't realize was that from the very beginning, the business model of 23andMe was not to sell DNA tests. The business model itself was to aggregate the largest human DNA database on the planet to sell for someday probably billions of dollars in revenue because of its value for research. We don't have that. There is no fine print in our consent form, and the only way, even if this company decided there was a valid use for it in the future, it would require the overt contacting of literally every single person in their overt agreement to allow their data to be aggregated and sold. So it's not in the plans. It's not in the paperwork. There's no gotchas. And I, frankly, based on my experience with the people in the process and the science, I don't think it will ever become a relevant part of our business model, because our model is about the products, not about the DNA. Our gene panel is just a means to an end. We need the data to be able to make the products, but it's the products and the products' value to human beings, which is the driving force behind this company, not the genetic data. Last question. Okay. Here's the last question. Is this call tonight being recorded to listen to again? No. It is not. However, we are planning on, to the very best of our abilities, doing this call every single Thursday night at 9 o'clock so that you can get on and discuss it. And frankly, I think that's a better approach because the content will continue to change and the content will continue to stay relevant that way. And you'll still be able to ask questions, whether it's the second or the 20th time. We'll be happy to answer them. So I'm hoping that this will stay fresh and stay live as opposed to being recorded. I want to thank everybody for allowing. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, we might want to let them to give us some feedback on, because this call went longer than you and I ever expected, but we had good conversation. But they may be looking for something that they could send some of their colleagues to that would be just a short synopsis where we kind of present this and don't have a lot of question and answers that make it run long, that will give people an introduction to it. And then another call like this that allows people to be more interactive and talk to us and get more inside information. Just a thought.
The biggest single reason, however, for not recording it is we would then completely lose control over who was allowed access to it. And because we've gotten into a lot of things that would be absolute violations of compliance law, not just policy, but actual law with regards to making some of this information available to the consumer public, it has been deemed to not be an appropriate risk for the company. We really take our responsibility seriously of protecting the public from this information and making it available to healthcare providers both. And so we're making the commitment to, and frankly, it's easier for us to record it and have it watched 1,000 times than have us to have to do 50 hours worth of live webinars, but we would prefer it this way. And I think it's the most appropriate for the company. I want to thank everybody for getting on tonight. Thank you so much for letting us share your evening with you. And we hope we have convinced many of you to join us in what we think is a wonderful crusade to help change our healthcare system for the better, where we truly try to make people more well, where we really try to actually prevent long-term disease consequences and costs by helping people become well.
Joel, you may want to give out your email if they want to get on your email list on these calls and when they're going to be, so they can share that with their colleagues.
My name, Joel, Joel .Guerin, which is spelled Guerin 7 @gmail.com. That's Joel.Guerin, Guerin 7 @gmail.com. Also, I have a Facebook page, WellSpan for Life. WellSpan is one word, WELLSPAN for Life. If you join that page, you'll have to friend me first and then join the page. It's a private page where I post my webinar schedule every week. So you will always see any webinars that are available and the links, especially for things such as this, where you can register for the future healthcare provider only calls. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Hope you enjoyed it. We certainly did. And since most of you stayed on so long, we're hoping that you got a lot out of it as well. Thank you all. Good night and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.